So now today, we're going to go into a whole new idea. We're going to talk about the intellect and the emotions. What Hasidut or Kabbalah calls seichel and midot. So, in order to understand this idea of intellect and emotions, seichel and midot, we need to understand a fascinating idea from King David. King David says in Psalms, in Tehillim, Kirvat Elokim li tov, which means the nearness of God is good to me. Now, if you talk about the nearness of God, which means God being closer to us, we have three concepts here. The first one is God, Elokim, which on that level, God is this abstract thought. Then there is Kirvat Elokim, which means the closeness of God, which means that within the intelligence of the individual feels a closeness, but it is still removed from his or her practical life. So I feel like there is God in my life, but it's removed from me. It's this outer idea, this idea that I maybe can fathom, but I don't really feel. I don't really make it part of me. And then there's the third, which we call the litov. It is good to me, which means that it's something that I can feel an actual desire for. It becomes so much part of me that it moves me and it changes me and it allows me to feel a particular desire for a particular idea. So let's put it in other terms. When you experience something, you can react in three ways. You can respond by saying, all I see here is godliness. All I see here is intelligence. I don't even see that there's a human being. I don't even see that I'm an individual. All I see here is there's a godly idea. This is called total abstraction. We call this hafshata, total abstraction. It's completely removed from the real world of emotions. Hafshata. The second is this reaction to an intermediary step. When you say Hashem is not only an intellectual concept that excludes feelings and emotions, rather I can recognize such a thing as closeness to God. We call this midot shebeseichel, the emotions within the mind. The mind recognizes beyond the intellectual such a thing as closeness, or such a thing as fear, or anger, or love. It doesn't say I fear. It doesn't say I love. It doesn't say I want to be close, because there is an actual emotion felt in the heart. All there exists at this level is the notion, the idea of fear or love, because since the intellect is operative, it absorbs the notion, not allowing it to express itself in the heart. This is probably why we call it an overpowering intellectual experience. You see, what we're trying to create here is this fusion of heart and mind. But how do you create a fusion of heart and mind if perhaps we become so focused or so one with the heart or so one with the mind? Let's say we constantly do abrupted things, like we go after our emotions and we don't think things through. We just respond. We say something to someone, or just a natural response to something. Or maybe there are people who they just think and think and think and think and think, and they never actually get anywhere. They never, either they decide they're not going to say anything, or they overthink things so much that nothing ever gets done because they're just so busy thinking. But what's the third reaction? And this, I think, is the unique reaction of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe, who we're celebrating today the anniversary of his release from prison. And after he was released from prison, became the day which he said is now we're free to be able to talk about these secrets, to talk about these inner ideas. So what does he say? He says, the closeness of God is good for me. Li tov. It's good for me. That it's an actual midah, an actual emotion that's felt in the heart, connecting directly by saying, I want. Here is a movement from a pure state of intellect, which is totally removed from the world of emotions and from a state of understanding that's important to have an actual feeling, to a very real, very down-to-earth feeling that's in the heart that motivates a person to act with feeling and emotion. What we want is that someone should be able to hear an idea, a concept that is removed from them, and then they should be able to act on it. Because if you learn something, which in our world, in the education system, which we call education from the Greek word edukara, the conveying of the message, that's our world. People go to school here in Canada. You can go to school till you're in your 30s. Nobody ever leaves school because they need to pay back your student loans. So why? Because I can get another PhD, I can get another master's degree, constantly just going more and more and more. But it's just because there's the conveying of the message. I don't feel anything. I'm not one with the message. When the professor speaks, I don't feel like I'm one with the information. In Judaism, we don't call it education. We call it chinuch, dedication. That we are dedicated. Dedicated meaning that we are one with the idea. That when we learn something which may be at this moment removed from me, maybe this that we're learning right now is a new idea, something you never heard before. So it's removed from you. But in a few minutes, it's going to become one with you. It's going to lead you to action. And as a result of that, you may repeat it to someone else, even forgetting that you heard it here today. That's how much. That's how important it is. That you should be able to repeat this idea to someone else, forgetting that you even heard it here today. Now, the first approach would be pure intellect. The second approach would be when the action ascends to the mind being superior and the emotions being inferior. This doesn't lead to a result because the primary thing here is intelligence. The mind recognizes a concept of closeness or an idea of awe or an idea of love, but it conceptualizes them without the actual action. So it knows that it loves, or it has a conceptualization of love or a conceptualization of awe, but it only knows it on a theoretical level, not on a way that leads the person to do something. But what's the third method, the tov li, or the li tov? The third method is when the mind descends to the emotions and gives in and acknowledges the emotions as superior. I want it. I love it. I am completely identified with whatever the attribute is. Which means I really am connected with this emotion that I feel in my heart. But this isn't the ultimate perfection. And this is not going to help us create healthy emotions. There's actually a more perfected approach that incorporates all these ideas. What is the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is to allow each, the mind and the emotions, to retain their own identity. Which means we're making the ideas and thoughts that are very lofty, that are very delicate, accessible to the average human mind without compromising on an iota of their purity. So you would be worried about this. You would say, hold on a second. If you're going to start talking about deep secrets of the Torah, if you're going to start talking about deep ideas, difficult ideas, what's going to end up happening is you're going to water down, so to speak. You're going to water down all these very lofty, these very high, very difficult ideas. And it ends up being that, you're talking to an average person, so who really cares? But what would that fusion look like? The ability to talk about lofty, very powerful, very real ideas, but without watering them down. Without losing the essence, the purity of the thought. How does that work? The idea of how it would work is we'd have to figure out a fusion. We'd have to figure out a way for them to meet halfway, right? We spoke about the emotions being on the bottom of the mountain and the thought being on the top of the mountain. So either the emotions can go up to the thought can go down to the emotions, or they can meet halfway in the middle. And that's unity. So how does that unity happen? The unity happens when the two can meet in the middle, but they're not irresponsible of forsaking their true position. So they know who they are. They know where they come from. The emotions, it knows its passion. It knows its desires. Imagine me giving this class right now without emotions. It knows its place. The intellect, it knows its place. It knows its thought. It knows what it's supposed to do. So what ends up happening is the emotions and the intellect still remain in their same exact place. They still remain in their same exact idea, but they're able to fuse. They're able to become one. You follow? Okay. So now let's understand each of these approaches. So the first approach would be the descent of the mind into the emotions, which means the seichel in the midot, the descent of the mind into the emotions. The second would be the elevation of the emotions into the intellect, known as midot shebeseichel. And the third, this new approach allows for both a healthy, concrete emotions felt in the heart, guided and harnessed by the intellect. The ultimate of this mind and heart relationship would be this that we call midot al pi seichel. So let's go back and understand. In the first approach, when the mind goes down the mountain, so to speak, what's happening? The mind is meeting the emotions on the emotions turf. And the mind is saying, oh, great emotions, I surrender to you. It's true that I'm coming from above. It's true that I am on a higher level than you, because I'm the mind and you're the emotions. And the mind physically is on a higher level than the heart when a person is standing upright. But I'm going from above and I'm coming down below. And so my emotions now are in control of my life, in control of my mind. And therefore, I'm coming into your turf. And whatever happens in your turf is your turf. But what is primary? That the emotions become, in this situation, in case one, the emotions become superior, and the mind inferior. When the emotions are really in control, which we called before seichel shebemidot, the intellect within the emotions. So the intellect now goes down the mountain, so to speak. It becomes part of the emotions. The emotions are in control. What's the problem with the emotions being in control? We don't know what's going to happen. We become a loose cannon. Today we're happy, tomorrow we're sad. Today we're jolly, 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 and tomorrow we're depressed.
Like you're a psychopath.
A little bit. But, and people say, well, that's just the way I do it. I'm intuitive. I trust my gut. It's very nice to trust your gut. It's a nice idea. But what ends up happening when you trust your gut too much? Today you feel one way and tomorrow you're moved another way. So it could be today you're going to be moved to something amazing, to something very powerful, to a new idea. And tomorrow what happens? I don't know. Tomorrow is another day. I don't care what's going to happen tomorrow. And so it becomes this battle, this real battle. And if you allow the emotions to be in control, then you don't know who's going to win. Every day is going to be another day. Every day is going to be another battle. Now, what happens at the opposite? So you would say the opposite. Let the emotions ascend to the mind. Let the emotions control. Let's not talk about the intellect coming down to the emotions. Let's talk about the emotions are going up to the intellect. And we're going to have what would be called this midot shebeseichel, which means the emotions are going to be within the intellect. What would I call this? I would call this the absent-minded professor. Why? Because the emotions are swimming in an ocean of intelligence, having nothing to do with the practical world. They're not really true. The professor's standing up there. He has no idea if the 200 students sitting in his classroom are actually studying anything. I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna talk, and I don't know who's listening. Kind of like being on Facebook, right? I don't know who's there. I don't know who's listening, but I'm just gonna talk. There's no way, unfortunately, for them to talk back. Well, it's true that they can write in the comments. So what ends up happening is it could be like you're like a lighthouse that's sending out a signal all night, and there could be no ships passing. So it could be that you're going to have a real, profound, powerful experience. Maybe a ship is going to pass, and they're going to see your light, and it could be not. So it could be that you're going to hone the emotions, and it could be that you won't hone the emotions. But what is this other approach? In this other approach, where there's a unity between the mind and the emotions, there's no superior and there's no inferior. Both become true equals, each having its own unique qualities, each one complementing the other and forming a true unity. The mind creates its own world, which is abstract and removed from real life issues, while the emotions are in the practical world. So what ends up happening? Each one has a very important place. The emotions are the ones that are connecting us to this real world. The mind is connecting us to higher ideas. And now we're able to bring higher ideas into an emotional world without compromising on the higher ideas. So let's take an example, because this has all been theoretical now. The example I'm going to give is the first of the emotions. The first of the emotions in Kabbalah is called chesed, which we're going to translate as loving kindness. So here we're going to use loving kindness as a metaphor for this idea of the unity between the mind and the emotions. The example, the person who's given as the example of chesed is the patriarch Abraham. He becomes the living embodiment of chesed. His kindness was so magnificent. It was so overflowing. Yet, at all times, guided by the objectivity of intellect. So the story the Torah tells is that it's the third day following his circumcision. Why is it the third day? Because the Torah says it's when the pain is most severe. The third day, Abraham just circumcised himself, and now he's leaving his tent to look for strangers, to invite to his table so he can feed them. Now, he's 99 years old. He just circumcised himself. How did he have the physical strength to get out of bed? He's just been inflicted with pain. He is in excruciating pain. Why was it possible for Abraham on the third day when the circumcision was most painful to get out of bed, to go look for strangers to feed? Because the benevolence in Abraham's life was greater than the pain. Which means while he was lying in bed, he wasn't able to rest. He wasn't able to be calm. His spiritual agony outweighed his physical pain. And he needed to find someone to help in order to achieve the peace of mind needed for recuperation. Which means in order for Abraham to heal, he needed to go out and find someone to help. That was the power and that was the magnitude of his benevolence. The Talmud in Sota explains this verse. The verse in Bereshit with regards to Abraham, it says, and he called in the name of God, Lord of the universe. To mean, the Talmud says it's to mean not only did he himself call God, but he made others do so as well. He always had people coming into his house to eat, to drink, and after they finished eating and drinking, they picked themselves up and they're about to leave, and he told them the following. Either you have a choice. I want you to give thanks to my God for the food that you ate, or you're going to pay me $1 million. Now, of course, if there's a choice between paying you $1 million or just saying thanks, all I have to do is say thanks to your God. So of course they opted to say thanks to his God. But hold on a second. Maybe it looks like from this story that Abraham uses blackmail to get the guests to do what he wanted. How can it be possible that the forefather of the Jewish people, or today we say the forefather of the great three religions, used blackmail to get people to believe in one God? That's not the epitome of loving kindness. He should have said, come into my home, eat as you wish, whatever you want, mikasa, sukasa, my home is your home, happy birthday. That would be loving kindness. Why is he going out and saying to the people, if you don't praise my God, if you don't thank my God, which at the time is not the prevalent idea, monotheism is not the prevalent idea in society. Most people believed in deities. But if you don't pray to my God, you're going to have to pay me $1 million. And finally, since Abraham epitomized the quality of chesed, the quality of loving kindness, to the point of putting aside his physical pain for the pleasure of helping people, then how is it possible that this man would be able to act cruel or mean? If this is the very essence of Abraham, he didn't possess, according to our teachings, he did not possess an iota of severity. So how could he say no? How could he pressure these people? How could he use harshness? This is the very opposite of loving kindness. And this is where we have to understand this fusion between the mind and the intellect, the mind and the emotions. Kabbalah explains, Chassidut explains, by teaching us that the true objective of healthy emotions is healthy emotions guided by the intellect. This is known as midot al pi seichel. in which there is a unity of intellect and emotions. An emotion is very powerful, and it's felt in the heart. When an emotion creates, it hones or it imbues or gives rise to action, it does so with an overwhelming power. It causes a person to go too far and to act indiscriminately. In many respects, to behave like an animal that acts primarily based on instinct, without discerning between good and bad. Which means the animal wants to eat. It doesn't matter that maybe there's another thing, life over there, that it doesn't matter what happened. I want to eat, I want to eat. I want to sleep, I want to sleep. So the animal has within it the instinct, and that instinct would drive it to do whatever it wants to do. We, human beings, are not animals. Primarily, the MO, the modus operandi, is intellect, which is cold, which is analytical, which is rational. It's the complete opposite of emotions. So how do we bring these two worlds together? If we go according to our emotions, if we allow our emotions to govern, then what happens? We become like an animal. But if we allow our mind to govern, then we become aloof. We become cold and calculated and rational and analytical. So how do we find that fusion? It's by realizing that each has a place. It is the responsibility of the intellect to tell what's right and wrong. That's the decision. The heart is not allowed to tell you what's right and wrong. Where people say, I trust my gut, the heart doesn't make decisions. The intellect's job is to make the decisions. Because the intellect is able to discern between right and wrong. Once the right and wrong has been established, the intellect asks the emotions to activate their warmth and passion. And since the intellect realizes its limitations with regards to acting emotionally, so therefore it demands that the emotions use their strength. And this approach leads to a very proper and healthy emotions that are not out of control. I'll give you an example. It's like telling a 2-year-old, I want you to decide when your bedtime is. No. You don't tell a 2-year-old to decide when their bedtime is. I know there's all these newfound parenting ideas where we let them all go wild and they don't have to go to school anymore. I don't know what they're doing now. Well, let them all be good and well. But a 2-year-old needs to know boundaries. And those boundaries are set by the parent. The 2-year-old can't say, oh, well, I don't feel like going to bed right now. Well, guess what? I'm your parent, and I tell you go to bed. I don't want to go to bed. I want to stay up. I don't care. I'm your parent, and I'm going to tell you to go to bed right now. That is the intellect's relationship with the emotions. The intellect is able to discern between good and bad. It's the parent. The emotions are the child. Now, the child is wonderful. We love the child. A child has this increased level of emotions, and there's excitement, and there's a lot of great things that come from it. But this child cannot decide their bedtime. As soon as an emotion wants to get carried away in an improper way, it has a check and balance system, which is called the intellect. The intellect is what decides what is right and wrong, so the emotions can act on it. What ends up happening as a result is it prevents it from acting out. So when both the intellect and the emotions are able to activate their strength, the intellect discerning right and wrong, the emotions acting with the passion and love and excitement and enthusiasm, they work in unison. Each one knows its place. And in Hasidus, this is such an important element of life, is that every single person and every single part of ourselves need to know what is its place. It's not the place of the child to decide when my bedtime is. It's the place of the parent. It's not the place of the gut to be trusted to be able to make life decisions. which today is a very common issue that happens. So, yeah.
So, if the example emotional for the 2-year-old, you're right, but isn't there something to be said for allowing the 2-year-old to express their feelings?
So, classes. I mean, there's different ideas of the 2-year-old saying, you give the 2-year-old a choice. Do you want to go with on your feet or my feet? Do you want to go with the bottle or with the pacifier? I mean, yeah, but in a 2-year-old way.
Yeah.
Don't give the 2-year-old choices to make. The 2-year-old shouldn't be deciding whether or not we're going to be buying this house. Mm. Oh, honey, do you like the house? No, that's an adult decision. Yeah. So the same way the emotions can't decide important decisions. It's for the intellect to be able to discern what's right and wrong.
I'm not saying. I'm just saying that express them, because we have to express our emotions. It's covered by the self, but it's still, you need to be able to get those things out.
That's right. No, and it's a very important thing, which means a lot of people think that moach shavet alev, which means the mind, which is honing or guiding the emotions, means that it's the mind and don't listen to the emotions. No, we need that passion. We need the emotions. We need that excitement. We need that we have that. I mean, think about this class right now without any passion or excitement. If I wasn't excited about teaching this, it would be very monotone. I mean, I'm sure you've gone to classes in your life that were very monotone, where there's too much intellect and not enough emotions. So we need both of them. But imagine it's just my emotions giving this class right now. What would we be doing? I don't know what. I don't know. So now let's go back to Abraham, because Abraham became our example of loving kindness. Abraham had an obligation not to allow the strangers to walk away without thanking God for the food. That was his intellect harnessing his emotion. So he does epitomize kindness. But if he had let them go, it would be Abraham's emotions acting wildly, which means his emotions want to just give. I want you. I love you. I want you to have as much food, just galore. And the intellect says, wait. The intelligence says, wait. You got to thank God. So because he was who he was, is the very reason he was able to use his intellect to intervene and to guide his emotions. It isn't blackmail. It's truth and wisdom.
It's extortion.
You see, it's very easy to say that it's extortion.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, look, the funny thing is, 4,000 years ago when Abraham started talking about monotheism, he was one man standing alone. Today, majority of the Western world, and we're talking about the Western world that is quite intelligent, and we have science, and we have access to information like never before. We follow his example. We follow his idea. So you call it extortion?
Well, but I guess the way it was framed, because, I mean, when they came and you offer something, you don't give them a bill at the end.
Right.
That's basically it. That's what I have a problem with, rather than saying, all this beneficence comes from God.
Right.
And I think we should be together and thank God for this before you go on your way. Or something, to frame it in a positive way. Because to me, then afterwards you walk away and go, damn it.
Well, no, it's true. So, I mean, that's maybe where your choice comes in. How you're going to use your emotions, which means...
This is a midrash, right?
This is Hasidus. This is Hasidic thought. This is Kabbalistic and Hasidic thought. Mm-hmm. So we know that this is the right way to do. The right way to do it, the Abraham way, is that when you're done eating, you thank God, right, the creator of the food. Mm-hmm. Now, so that's the intellect saying, thank God. Now, how you're going to do that, the process in which you're going to say to everyone, Rabotai Nivarech, friends, let us bless together, which is what we do today, right? Okay, so that would be your choice of how you're going to say, or whatever song you're gonna sing. I remember when we were in camp, we used to sing, let's bench, da 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 da. However you're going to do it, you're going to get the people excited about it, no problem. But that is where your emotions and your loving kindness comes in. This is just an example. But now let's bring it to your life. You know what the right thing to do is. How you're going to encourage the people around your table to do it, that is your emotions and your loving kindness. Is it extortion? The people came to your house for dinner. They never came to Shabbat before in their life. They're coming, you made a beautiful meal for them. They say, wow, Peggy, thank you so much. And you say, hold on, wait. Before we eat dessert. Yeah, exactly. Before we eat dessert. Yeah, now a lot of people...
listen to us sing.
Exactly. A lot of people are going to say, I never did this before. I never did this prayer before. Why should I do your prayer?
Right.
So is that extortion? That they came to your house for dinner, for Shabbat, and now you're making them do a prayer they never did before.
Well,
You're forcing them to do it.
No, but I mean, they're forced to listen to us. They're not forced to do it. That's the difference. Just like on the Talasha Dining. Whoever
But
wants to do it, does it. You know, there's
Right.
not like, get in there.
No, but I think this is where...
But there's a difference between inviting them to join you and saying, put $20 on it.
or if you don't join me,
Exactly.
or if you don't join me, I'm going to
Yeah.
Exactly.
charge you $1 million.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's it.
Got a question?
Yeah.
So,
Hey, good morning.
it's different, but
Yeah.
our friend was doing it out of kindness, but Muslims in some countries to say if you don't convert to Islam, we're going to kill you.
Right.
Now, aside from the death thing,
In
how
all
is it different
countries,
from what-
yes, by the way.
Yes.
How is that different from what
In all Muslim countries.
aside from I'm going to kill you, it said you're going to pay me. Like, what's the difference between that philosophy and others?
I mean, we're getting into very, very detailed things. I mean, I would say there's a very big difference between I'm going to kill you and pay me.
Oh no, perhaps besides that, because that's
That's an obvious
everything
difference.
else, yeah.
You're saying as far as the extortion element of it,
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. Like, what's the is that
maybe
where they get it from?
maybe this particular example of Abraham is not as. I mean, the example was the idea of this unison between the mind and the heart.
Mm-hmm.
That not to let the emotions run wild and to be able to have this fusion of mind and heart. That's the idea of it. Now, how we act on it, that's a different story. So what we have to do is we start off with the facts. And then we use our passion, our excitement to be able to act on the facts. That's what we're talking about here. So let's go one step further before we go into our Talmud class. And then perhaps it'll all become clearer. So let's say a child is playing with a knife.
The father would say, "Don't play with the knife." The child thinks that you're being mean, but
The father takes it away. The child starts to cry.
Why are you being so mean? I'm not mean. The father knows that he's doing it for safety reasons.
So
Which of those
what's the
reasons?
parent doing? Is the parent being kind or being strict?
Yes, both.
He's being both. He's being kind.
What do you mean?
Taking the knife
The
away,
child was playing with a knife. The parent took it away. The child cries.
It's
The child being
different.
kind? The parent is being kind?
The
child is crying.
The parent is the sefel. The sefel has to rule
So-
the needles.
So according to this idea, the parent is actually being very kind because it's not emotional, undiscriminating kindness. It's true love because the parent is using the gift of the human species, which is called intelligence, in fostering love and appreciation. The parent is activating a healthy emotion based on a healthy mind. This is exactly the meaning of midot al pi sechel. So you would think, if you didn't know better, when you see just give the child the knife. Why are you making the child cry? That is the emotions acting out of whack. Don't let the child cry. Well, who cares? And the parent says, are you crazy? What am I giving a 2-year-old a knife for? So now, let's go into the practical. What is the practical scenario here? Midot shebeseichel would be the realization of the mind that kindness and love are important. Therefore, the intellect has an intellectual bend towards closeness. But it's all part of the mind. Therefore, the result is a subjective view of kindness based on intellect. Now, the opposite would be the justification of the mind in supporting the heart's desires. Here again, what happens? The intellect is used as a pawn in supporting those emotional needs, and therefore it's a very subjective view driven by the emotions. However, in this case, where there's a unison between the two, there's an objective view of loving kindness. Since the actions, since the emotions are acting based on the intellect, so that if the emotion goes too far and becomes overwhelming and becomes subjective, along comes the intellect and says, wait a moment, that's not proper. You can't do that. And that is true objectivity. Which means, midot al pi seichel. And midot without the guidance of the intellect can be compared to two contemporary ideas. The first one would be tough love, which would be an expression of midah al pi seichel. Yes, it's love. However, it comes with this tough approach. It takes the form of saying, no, but I truly care for you, and it's for your best interest that I don't give you what you want. And the second would be the helicopter parent, loving too much. The expression of this emotion of love without even considering what kind of person the recipient is. Just letting the emotions lead wherever they will. This approach can be very harmful to the character of the individual. And then there's the objective approach, allowing the person their individuality, yet being completely faithful to a higher truth, is one of the reasons that the teachings of Hasidut incorporates this esoteric and unknown, while yet communicating it through the exoteric and the known. This enables a person to have the virtues of both and to have a very objective view of himself and the world around him. So, we have 3 different forms of parenting, just using our example, because we were using parenting as an example today. We have the drill sergeant, we have the helicopter, and then we have the consultant. The drill sergeant says, you do it and you do it now. I don't really care who you are. I'm not using any emotions. Don't give me all your crying. Stop crying and do it because I said. The helicopter says, oh, sweetheart, I'm sorry. It's okay, little 2-year-old.